Kind of a long lecture today. We're covering two chapters: Industrial Organization and Organizational Psychology, Chapter 13, and Chapter 14, Health Psychology, one of my favorite areas. Okay, well, let's get started, I guess. Health psychology is one of my favorite areas because I'm a positive psychologist, but I didn't think they did as good a job as they could have. There we go. Industrial organizational psychology. This is one that is rarely covered in Gen Psych classes. There is rarely a chapter about industrial organizational psychology. I'm a little surprised it's in this textbook, but since it is, we'll go ahead and cover it. I think I told you, or maybe I didn't. I have a student that went to graduate school. This is a student from Ashford University who went to graduate school, and he just graduated with a PhD in industrial organizational psychology. One of the reasons it may be here is because industrial organizational psychology is the most lucrative of all the areas of psychology that you can major in. The industrial IO psychologists make the most money of all the psychologists on average, of course. And I'll have to admit, he's making good money. He's making almost twice as much money. I talked to him the other day, and he said that he only has to teach 3 classes a year, but he has to do research. He's going to teach 3 classes a year, and he's making almost twice as much money as I'm making, which I found kind of curious. He's from Bangladesh, and he's headed for Duluth, Minnesota. Duluth, Minnesota, eh? So that's I wish him well. He loved his experience at Ashford, which is in Clinton, Iowa. And he wanted to come back to this area. He had a choice between a job in Massachusetts, Waterford, Mass, and Duluth, Minnesota. And he picked Duluth, Minnesota because it's similar to Clinton, Iowa, and that's what he was looking for. That I don't know, that Midwest mindset, I guess. Anyway, he didn't want the big city. Of course, he's from Bangladesh, which is a very crowded country. So maybe he was trying to stay away from the East Coast. I don't know. Anyway, he's going to be in Duluth, and potentially he's going to drive through here, and I'll get to see him before he heads up to Duluth, Minnesota. In 2019, people who worked in the United States spent an average of about 42 to 54 hours per week working. Sleeping was the only other activity that they spent more time on, with an average of about 43 to 42 hours per week. The workday is a significant portion of workers' time and energy. It impacts their lives and their families' lives in positive and negative physical and psychological ways. Industrial organizational psychology is a branch of psychology that studies how human behavior and psychology affect work and how they are affected by work. Industrial and organizational psychologists work in 4 main contexts: academia, government, consulting firms, and business. And that's one of the reasons, these are the 2 reasons why they make so much money, is because I was talking to Russell, that's my student, and he wanted to go into space travel. And of course, as a industrial organizational psychologist, that is one of the areas that is covered by IO psychology. As you can imagine, you want your workspace to be as efficient as possible. And that is the job of an industrial organizational psychologist, along with engineers, of course. Most IO psychologists have a master's or a doctorate degree. As a matter of fact, I've never heard of a program. I don't know of any program around the country that awards a bachelor's degree in IO psychology. It's mostly a graduate endeavor. The field of IO psychology can be divided into three broad areas: industrial, organizational, and human factors. Industrial psychology is concerned with describing job requirements and assessing individuals for their ability to meet those requirements. In addition, once employees are hired, industrial psychology studies uh, and develops ways to train, evaluate, and respond to those evaluations. As a consequence of its concern for candidate characteristics, industrial psychology must also consider issues of legality regarding discrimination in hiring. Organizational psychology is a discipline interested in how the relationships among employees affect those employees and the performance of a business. This includes studying worker satisfaction, motivation, and commitment. This field also studies management, leadership, and organizational culture, as well as how an organization structures management and leadership styles, social norms, and role expectations affect individual behavior. As a result of its interest in worker well-being and relationships, organizational psychology also considers the subjects of harassment, including sexual harassment and workplace violence. Human factor psychology is the study of how workers interact with the tools of work and how to design those tools to optimize workers' productivity, safety, and health. These studies can involve interactions as straightforward as the fit of a desk, a chair, the computer to a human having to sit on the chair at the desk using the computer for several hours each day. They can also include the examination of how humans interact with complex displays and their ability to interpret them accurately and quickly. In Europe, this field is referred to as ergonomics. Occupational health psychology deals with the stress, diseases, and disorders that can affect employees as a result of the workplace. The field is informed by research from the medical, biological, psychological, organizational, human factors, human resources, and industrial fields. Individuals in this field seek to examine the ways in which the organization affects the quality of work life for an employee and the responses that employees have towards their organization or as a result of their organization's influence on them. The responses for employees are not limited to the workplace, as there may be some spillover into their personal lives outside of work, especially if there is not good work-life balance. The ultimate goal of an occupational health psychologist is to improve the overall health and well-being of an individual and as a result increase the overall health of the organization. Humanitarian work psychology has developed as a brainchild of a small group of IO psychologists. The group seeks to help marginalized members of society, such as low-income individuals, find work. They help to determine ways to deliver humanitarian aid during major catastrophes. They also reach out to those in the local community who do not have the knowledge, skills, and abilities to be able to find gainful employment that would enable them to not need to receive aid. Humanitarian work psychologists try to help the underserved individuals develop KSAs that they can use to improve their lives and their current situations. When ensuring these underserved individuals receive training or education, the focus is on skills that once learned will never be forgotten and can serve individuals throughout their lifetimes as they seek employment. And we're going to be talking about KSAs more through this chapter. So knowledge, skills, and abilities, that is what a KSA is. Industrial and organizational psychology had its origins in the early 20th century. In 1913, Hugo Münsterberg published Psychology and Industrial Efficiency, which covered topics such as employee selection, employee training, and effective advertising. And I think this is Hugo right here, and this is Walter Dill Scott. Maybe I've got them backwards. I do have them backwards. This is Scott and this is Münsterberg. Walter Dill Scott was one of the first psychologists to apply psychology to advertising, management, and personnel selection. In 1903, Scott published two books, The Theory of Advertising and Psychology of Advertising. They are the first books to describe the use of psychology in the business world. By 1911, he published two more books, Influencing Men in Business and Increasing Human Efficiency in Business. In 1916, a newly formed division in the Carnegie Institute of Technology hired Scott to conduct applied research on employee selection. During World War I, Robert Yerkes organized a group under the Surgeon General's office that developed methods for screening and selecting enlisted men. They developed the Army Alpha Test to measure mental abilities. The Army Beta Test was a nonverbal form of that test that was administered to illiterate and non-English speaking draftees. And this is a copy of the Beta Test over here. They needed to complete the pictures. Scott and Bingham organized a group under the Adjutant General's office with the goal to develop selection methods for officers. They created a catalog of occupational needs for the Army, essentially a job description system and a system of performance ratings and occupational skill set tests for officers. And one of the things that they discovered when they did all these intelligence tests for the soldiers is that there were a lot of people that couldn't read, people that they needed to be in the Army who couldn't read. And that was one of the reasons was because of the lack of public education that was universal, that was not universal at the time around the United States. There were select places around the United States where you didn't have to go to school, mostly in the deep South. But there were also places in the West where schooling was just not required. And for that reason, they decided, that's one of the big pushes that happened after World War I, was to get public education all over the United States. From 1929 to 1932, Elton Mayo and his colleagues began a series of studies at a plant near Chicago, Western Electric's Hawthorne Works. This long-term project took industrial psychology beyond just employee selection and placement to a study of more complex problems of interpersonal relations, motivation, and organizational dynamics. These studies marked the origin of organizational psychology. They began as research into the effects of physical work environment, the level of lighting in a factory, but the researchers found that the psychological and social factors in the factory were of more interest than the physical factors. These studies also examined how human interaction factors such as supervisorial style increased or decreased productivity. Analysis of the findings by later researchers led to the term the Hawthorne Effect, which describes the increase in performance of individuals who are aware that they are being observed by researchers or supervisors. It was really kind of weird because they would change something and then they would try to find out if it increased productivity. And what they discovered was it did. It increased productivity. But then somebody said, wait a minute, let's try switching it back and see what happens. And much to their surprise, when they switched things back to the way they were originally, it also increased productivity. So what the Hawthorne Effect is if you pay attention to somebody, it will increase their productivity. In other words, they will try to impress you by doing more work or doing a better job. And that's exactly what the Hawthorne Effect is about. Hawthorne Effect is because you're observing people, they try to do a better job. So all you have to do is pay attention to people to get them to do what you want them to do. What the original researchers found was that any change in a variable such as lighting levels led to an improvement in productivity. This was true even when the change was negative, such as a return to poor lighting. The effect faded when the attention faded. In other words, the less attention you paid to people, the lower their productivity. The Hawthorne Effect concept endures today as an important experimental consideration in many fields and a factor that has to be controlled for in an experiment. So anytime you're doing research, there's always a possibility that you're going to see a change, and the change has more to do with the fact that you're paying attention to this person than the fact that it actually changes. In other words, an experimental treatment of some kind may produce an effect simply because it involves greater attention of the researchers on the participants, and this is known as the infamous Hawthorne Effect. In the 1930s, Kurt Lewin conducted research on the effects of various leadership styles, team structure, and team dynamics. Lewin is considered the founder of social psychology, and much of his work and that of his students produced results that had important influences in organizational psychology. Lewin and his students' research included an important early study that used children to study the effect of leadership style on aggression, group dynamics, and satisfaction. Lewin was also responsible for coining the term group dynamics, and he was involved in studies of group interactions, cooperation, competition, and communication that bear on organizational psychology. The field of human factors psychology was developed by Frederick Taylor, who was an engineer who saw that if one could redesign the workplace, there would be an increase in both output for the company and wages for the workers. In the Principles of Scientific Management, he examined management theories, personnel selection and training, as well as the work itself using time and motion studies. Taylor argued that the principal goal of management should be to make the most money for the employer, along with the best outcome for the employee. He believed that the best outcome for the employee and management would be achieved through training and development so that each employee could provide the best work. He believed that by conducting time and motion studies for both the organization and the employee, the best interests of both were addressed. Time motion studies were methods aimed to improve work by dividing different types of operations into sections that could be measured. These analyses were used to standardize work and to check the efficiency of people and equipment. One example of Taylor's theory in action involved workers handling heavy iron ingots. Taylor showed that the workers could be more productive by taking work rests. This method of rest increased worker productivity from 12.5 to 47 tons, moved per day with less reported fatigue, as well as increased wages for the workers who were paid by the ton. At the same time, the company's cost was reduced from 9.2 cents to 3.9 cents per ton. And strangely enough, they didn't accept it. The company didn't accept it. Something from my own family's life, I had my grandfather built roads, and one of the things he developed was banking the curves on railroad tracks. What used to happen, and this has led to a lot of accidents. When they built a train track, they wouldn't bank the curve, so the train had to slow down. If it didn't slow down, it would fall off the track. So what my grandfather did, he was supposed to repair a curve on a railroad that a train had gone off of. And what he did, he banked it. And of course, the engineers were very complimentary to him. They really liked it because they could go faster. But the owners of the railroad line just didn't like it at all, because they felt like that what they needed to do was to try to control everything. And because of that, they did pay my grandfather, but they told him to shut up and not to write it up in any journals. And eventually, of course, one of the railroad lines got a hold of the idea, and they started they started banking their curves so that trains could go faster, and that increased their that railroad's efficiency, and because of that, that railroad became Santa Fe and Albuquerque. It's not Albuquerque, is it? Atchison, Topeka, and the Santa Fe. That's the one. And then they were bought out by, or they bought out another railroad, and eventually, of course, they started banking the curves. But it was my grandfather's idea initially. This was in the late 1800s when he first did it. He did the same thing at the Indianapolis 500. The Speedway, the reason they called it the Speedway was because people could go faster. They had racetracks all over the United States, but you couldn't really go very fast because the curves weren't banked. Well, of course, cars didn't really go that fast at that point, but eventually they went faster and faster and faster. Barney Oldfield, of course, set a world record, a world land speed record at the Indianapolis 500 because the curves are banked. And my grandfather was the one that first started doing that. He banked the curve. The people were angry because the curve was, they didn't like it. And then once Barney Oldfield, of course, went around the track and went faster than anybody had ever gone, they realized that this was something that they needed to do. So you would think my grandfather would be a very rich man for doing these things. But as it turns out, the Indianapolis 500, the Speedway, was built in a swamp. And that's not the healthiest place to be. And all of his horses came down with glanders, and they died. And he lost his company because of it, despite the fact that he's the one that made everybody go faster. It didn't really make that much difference, you know. Everybody takes credit for things that somebody else does. The richest person gets to take most of the credit. Lillian Gilbreth and her husband Frank worked to make workers more efficient by reducing the number of motions required to perform a task. She not only applied these methods to industry, but also to the home, the office, shops, and other areas. She investigated employee fatigue and time management stress and found many employees were motivated by money and job satisfaction. In 1914, Gilbreth wrote The Psychology of Management, the Function of the Mind in Determining, Teaching, and Installing Methods of Least Waste. And she is known as the mother of modern management. The other thing she's known for is the treadle trash can. She's the one that came up with the idea of putting a treadle on the trash can so that you could pop the lid up. She's also the one who, when they started creating refrigerators, she's the one that put the shelves in the door because, well, that was another way of doing things. So she's the one that invented shelves and door in refrigerator doors and treadle trash cans, as weird as that is. Walter Bingham was hired as the chief psychologist for the War Department, now the War Department of Defense, of course, during World War II, and developed new systems of job selection, classification, training, and performance review, plus methods for team development, morale change, and attitude change. Other countries such as Canada and the United Kingdom also saw growth in IO psychology during World War II. In the years after the war, both industrial psychology and organizational psychology became areas of significant research effort. Concerns about the fairness of employment tests arose, and the ethnic and gender biases in various tests were evaluated with mixed results. In addition, a great deal of research went into studying job satisfaction and employee motivation. Congress passed the 1964 Civil Rights Act, stating that Title VII covered what is known as equal employment opportunity. This law protects employees against discrimination based on race, color, religion, sex, or national origin, as well as discrimination against an employee for association with an individual in one of these categories. Organizations had to adjust to the social, political, and legal climate of the civil rights movement, and these issues needed to be addressed by members of the IO in research and practice. There are many reasons for organizations to be interested in IO so that they can better understand the psychology of their workers, which in turn helps them understand how their organizations can become more productive and competitive. Industrial psychology focuses on identifying and matching persons to tasks within an organization. This involves job analysis, which means accurately describing the task or job. Then organizations must identify the characteristics of applicants for a match to the job analysis. It also involves training employees from their first day on the job throughout their tenure without the organization and appraising their performance along the way. IO psychologists write job descriptions. There are two related approaches to job analysis: task-oriented and worker-oriented. The task-oriented approach lists in detail the tasks that will be performed for the job. Each task is typically rated on scales for how frequently it is performed, how difficult it is, and how important it is to the job. The worker-oriented approach describes the characteristics required for the worker to successfully perform the job. This is called job specification. For job specification, the knowledge, skills, and abilities that the job requires are identified. Observation surveys and interviews are used to obtain the information required for both types of job analysis. It is possible to observe someone who is proficient in a position and analyze what skills are apparent. Another approach used is to interview people presently holding that position, their peers, and their supervisors to get a consensus of what they believe are the requirements of the job. The United States Department of Labor maintains a database of previously compiled job analyses for different jobs and occupations. This allows the IO psychologist to access previous analyses for nearly any type of occupation. This system is called the ONET. The site is open and you can see the KSAs that are listed for your own position or one that you might be curious about. Each occupation lists the tasks, knowledge, skills, abilities, work context, work activities, education requirements, interests, personality requirements, and work styles that are deemed necessary for success in that position. You can also see data on average earnings and projected job growth in that industry. Once a company identifies potential candidates for a position, the candidate's knowledge, skills, and other abilities must be evaluated and compared with the job description. These evaluations can involve testing and interview and work samples or exercises. Tests in the IO context are used to identify the personality characteristics of the candidate to match those to personality characteristics that would ensure good performance on the job. Most jobs for mid-size or large-size businesses in the United States require a personal interview as a step to the selection process. Because interviews are commonly used, they have been the subject of considerable research by industrial psychologists. I couldn't see the N right here. See, right there it is. Information derived from job analysis usually forms the basis for the types of questions asked. Interviews can provide a more dynamic source of information about the candidate than standard testing measures. Social factors and body language can influence the outcome of the interview. These include influences such as the degree of similarity of the applicant to the interviewer and nonverbal behaviors such as hand gestures, head nodding, and smiling. There are two types of interviews, unstructured and structured. In an unstructured interview, the interviewer may ask different questions of each different candidate. One candidate might be asked about their career goals, and another might be asked about their previous work experience. In an unstructured interview, the questions are often, though not always, unspecified beforehand. And in an unstructured interview, the responses to the questions asked are generally not scored using a standard system. In a structured interview, the interviewer asks the same questions of every candidate. The questions are prepared in advance, and the interviewer uses a standardized rating system for each response. With this approach, the interviewer can accurately compare two candidates' interviews. In a meta-analysis of studies examining the effectiveness of various types of job interviews, McDaniel and colleagues in 1994 found that structured interviews were more effective at predicting subsequent job performance of the job candidate. Training is an important element of success and performance in many jobs. Most jobs begin with an orientation period during which the new employee is provided information regarding the company history, policies, and administrative protocols, such as time tracking, benefits, and reporting requirements. An important goal of orientation training is to educate the new employee about the organizational culture, the values, visions, hierarchies, norms, and ways the company's employees interact. Essentially, how the organization is run, how it operates, and how it makes decisions. There will also be training that is specific to the job the individual has hired to do, or training during the individual's period of employment that teaches aspects of new duties or how to use the new physical or software tools. Mentoring is a form of informal training in which an experienced employee guides the work of a new employee. Mentors may be formally assigned to a new employee, or a mentoring relationship may develop informally. Mentoring effects on the mentor and the employee being mentored have been studied in recent years. A review of mentoring studies found significant but small effects of mentoring or on performance. For example, behavioral outcomes, motivation and satisfaction, and actual career outcomes. Allen et al. In 2004 found that mentoring positively affected a protege's compensation and number of promotions compared with non-mentored employees. Proteges were more satisfied with their careers and had greater job satisfaction. All the effects were small but significant. Mentoring is recognized to be particularly important to the career success of women by creating connections to informal networks, adopting a style of interaction that male managers are comfortable with, and with overcoming discrimination in job promotions. Gender combinations in mentoring relationships are also an area of active study. Raggans and Cotton in 1999 studied the effects of gender on the outcomes of mentoring relationships and found that proteges with a history of male mentors had significantly higher compensation, especially for male proteges. The study found that female mentor-male protege relationships were considerably rarer than the other gender combinations. A 2003 study by Arthur et al. Examined multiple other studies to determine how effective organizational training is. Their results showed that training was effective based on 4 types of measurement: the immediate response of the employee to the training effort, testing at the end of training to demonstrate the learning outcomes were met, behavioral measurement of job activities by supervisors, results such as productivity and profits. The examined studies represented diverse forms of training, including self-instruction, lecture and discussion, and computer-assisted training. Industrial and organizational psychologists are typically involved in designing performance appraisal systems for organizations. These systems are designed to evaluate whether each employee is performing their job satisfactorily. Industrial and organizational psychologists study research and implement ways to make work evaluations as fair and positive as possible. They also work to decrease the subjectivity involved with performance ratings. Fairly evaluated work helps employees do their jobs better, improves the likelihood of people being in the right jobs for their talents, maintains fairness, and identifies company and individual training needs. Performance appraisals are typically documented several times a year, often with a formal process and an annual face-to-face brief meeting between an employee and his supervisor. It is important that the original job analysis play a role in performance appraisal, as well as any goals that have been set by the employee or by the employee and supervisor. The meeting is often used for the supervisor to communicate specific concerns about the employee's performance and to positively reinforce elements of good performance. Performance appraisals are becoming more complex processes within organizations and are often used to motivate employees to improve performance and expand their areas of competence, in addition to assessing their job performance. Performance appraisals can be used to identify opportunities for training or whether a particular training program has been successful. One approach to performance appraisal is called 360-degree feedback appraisal. In this system, the employee's appraisal derives from a combination of ratings by supervisors, peers, employees supervised by the employee, and from the employee themselves. Occasionally, outside observers may be used as well, such as customers. The purpose of a 360-degree system is to give the employee, who may be a manager and supervisor, different perspectives of the employee's job performance. The system should help employees make improvements through their own efforts or through training. Many performance evaluations are disliked by organizations, employees, or both. Few of them have been adequately tested to see if they improve performance or motivate employees. One of the reasons evaluations fail to accomplish their purpose in an organization is that performance appraisal systems are often used incorrectly or are an inappropriate type of an organization's particular culture. An organization's culture is how the organization is run, how it operates, and how it makes decisions. It is based on collective values, hierarchies, and how individuals within the organization interact. Hiring decisions in the real world are often made based on factors other than matching a job analysis to KSAs. Interview rankings can be influenced by other factors, similarity in the interviewer, and the regional accent of the interviewee. A meta-analysis of experimental studies found that physical attractiveness benefited individuals in various job-related outcomes, such as hiring, promotion, and performance review. They also found that strength of the benefit appeared to be decreasing with time between the late 1970s and 1990s. This is Ronaldo, the famous Portuguese soccer player, who's supposed to be one of the handsomest men in the world, and this guy's not. I think maybe that's Ronaldo before they got his teeth fixed. I'm not sure. Anyway, maybe it is Ronaldo. The U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission is responsible for enforcing federal laws that make it illegal to discriminate against a job applicant or an employee because of the person's race, color, religion, sex, including pregnancy, national origin, age, 40 or older, disability, or genetic information. The United States has several specific laws regarding fairness and avoidance of discrimination. The Equal Pay Act requires the equal pay for men and women in the same workplace who are performing equal work. Let me take a quick drink. Despite the law, persistent inequities in earnings between men and women exist. Corbin and Hill in 2012 studied the gender gap by looking at earnings in the first year after college in the United States. When all factors were corrected, the study found an unexplained 7 cents on the dollar gap in the first year after college that can be attributed to gender discrimination in pay. Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 makes it illegal to treat individuals unfavorably because of their race or color of their skin. An employer cannot discriminate based on skin color, hair texture, or other immutable characteristics, which are traits of an individual that are fundamental to their identity in hiring, benefits, promotions, or termination of employees. This recently came up with people wearing burqas, which they had to decide whether burqas, the scarves, the headscarves worn by Muslim women, was they needed to decide whether that was an immutable characteristic, and actually they did. They decided that they needed to they had to wear their headscarves, and they couldn't be discriminated against because of the headscarf. The Pregnancy Discrimination Act of 1978 amends the Civil Rights Act. It prohibits job, for example, employment, pay, and termination, discrimination of women because she is pregnant as long as she can perform the work required. Federal legislation does not protect employees in the private sector from discrimination related to sexual orientation and gender identity. And this is something that you need to remember. So if it's a private sector, they can discriminate. It's only the federal legislation only covers federal employees. These groups include lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender individuals. Federal legislation protects federal employees from such discrimination. The District of Columbia and 20 states have laws protecting public and private employees from discrimination for sexual orientation. Most of the states with these laws also protect against discrimination based on gender identity. The Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990 states that people may not be discriminated against due to the nature of their disability. A disability is defined as a physical or mental impairment that limits one or more major life activities such as hearing, walking, and breathing. An employer must make reasonable accommodations for the performance of the job of an employee with disabilities. This might include making the work facility accessible with ramps, providing readers for blind personnel, or allowing for more frequent breaks. The ADA has now been expanded to include individuals with alcoholism, former drug use, obesity, and psychiatric disabilities. The premise of the law is that the individuals with disabilities can contribute to an organization, and they cannot be discriminated against because of their disabilities. The Civil Rights Act and the Age Discrimination in Employment Act make provisions for bona fide occupational qualifications, or BFOQs, which are requirements of certain occupations for which denying an individual employment would otherwise violate the law. And there's a reason why I have a picture of Hooters waitresses. Hooters is one of the organizations that has been able to get around BFOQs. They hire young, attractive women, and they dress them in scanty clothes, as you can see. People have tried to break into to the Hooters. Men have tried to get a job as waitresses or as waiters, I guess, at Hooters, and they failed. And it's because Hooters has been able to stay away from BFOQs. There are no BFOQ exceptions that apply to race, although the First Amendment protects artistic expression such as films in making race a requirement of a role. Examples of BFOQs would be hiring someone of a specific religion for a leadership position in a worship facility or for an executive position in religiously affiliated institutions, such as president of a university with religious ties. As I've told you before, I do not go to church. When I applied to select colleges around the United States, they required that you signed a affidavit of your religious affiliation. This was legal because those were Baptist colleges, or they were Lutheran colleges, or they were Wesleyan colleges, and they needed instructors who understood that specific religion. The Catholic Church, of course, does the same thing. Age has been determined to be a BFOQ for airline pilots, hence there are mandatory retirement ages for safety reasons. Sex has been determined as a BFOQ for guards in male prisons. And as I said, Hooters is able to get away with dodging around the BFOQs. They claim that this is that they can only have female waitresses, and they dress them like that. That's how they dress. Sex gender is the most common reason for invoking a BFOQ as a defense against accusing an employer of discrimination. Courts have established a three-part test for sex-related BFOQs that are often used in other types of legal cases for determining whether a BFOQ exists. Whether all or substantially all women would be unable to perform a job. This is the reason most physical limitations, such as able to lift 30 pounds, fails as reasons to discriminate, because most women are able to lift 30 pounds. The essence of the business test, in which having to choose the other gender would undermine the essence of the business operation. On a deeper level, this means that hiring cannot be made purely on customers' or others' preferences. Whether the employer cannot make reasonable alternative accommodations, such as reassigning staff. Privacy concerns are a major reason why discrimination based on gender is upheld by the courts. Most cases of BFOQs are decided on a case-by-case basis, and these court decisions inform policy and future case decisions. Organizational psychology is the second major branch of study and practice within the discipline of industrial and organizational psychology. In organizational psychology, the focus is on social interactions and their effect on the individual and on the functioning of the organization. Some people love their jobs, some people tolerate their jobs, and some people cannot stand their jobs. Job satisfaction describes the degree to which individuals enjoy their job. It was described by Edwin Locke in 1976 as a state of feeling resulting from appraising one's job experiences. While job satisfaction results from both how we think about our work, our cognition, and how we feel about our work, our effect, it is described in terms of effect. Job satisfaction is impacted by the work itself, our personality, and the culture we come from and live in. Job satisfaction is typically measured after a change in an organization, such as a shift in management model, to assess how the change affects employees. It may also be routinely measured by an organization to assess one of many factors expected to affect the organization's performance. In addition, polling companies like Gallup regularly measure job satisfaction on a national scale to gather broad information on the state of the economy and the workforce. Research has suggested that the work content factor, which includes variety, difficulty level, and role clarity of the job, is the most strongly predictive factor of overall job satisfaction. There is only a weak correlation between pay level and job satisfaction. Judge et al. In 2010 suggests that individuals adjust or adapt to their higher pay levels. Higher pay no longer provides a satisfaction the individual may have initially felt when their salary increased. So just by increasing your salary doesn't give you more job satisfaction. Job satisfaction is related to general life satisfaction, though personality and cultural factors may affect both job and general satisfaction. One study suggested that the relationship is reciprocal. Job satisfaction affects life satisfaction positively, and vice versa. Job satisfaction, specifically low job satisfaction, is related to withdrawal behaviors such as leaving a job or absenteeism. It appears that job satisfaction is related to organizational performance, which suggests that implementing organizational changes to improve employee job satisfaction will improve organizational performance. Job stress affects job satisfaction. Job stress or job strain is caused by specific stressors in an occupation. Stress can be an ambiguous term as it is used in common language. Stress is a perception and response of an individual to events judged as overwhelming or threatening to the individual's well-being. The events themselves are the stressors. Stress is a result of an employee's perception that the demands placed on them exceed their ability to meet them, such as having to fulfill multiple roles in a job or life in general, workplace role ambiguity, lack of career progress, lack of job security, lack of control over work outcomes, isolation, work overload, discrimination, harassment, and bullying. The stressors are different for women than men, and these differences are a significant area of research. Job stress leads to poor employee health, job performance, and family life. Job insecurity contributes significantly to job stress. Two increasing threats to job security are downsizing events and corporate mergers. Businesses typically involve IO psychologists in planning for implementing and managing these types of organizational change. And before I came to Dene College, I worked at Ashford University in Clinton, Iowa. Ashford University closed, and and they brought in a team to help us transition from one job to another. And there were IO psychologists in there. It was really kind of interesting. They didn't do a whole lot. Downsizing is an increasingly common response to a business's performance. Businesses perform pronounced failure to achieve profit goals, and it involves laying off a significant percentage of the company's employees. Industrial organizational psychologists may be involved in all aspects of downsizing, how the news is delivered to employees, both those being let go and those staying, how laid off employees are supported, for example, separation packages, and how retained employees are supported. And that's one of the things that we were given. We were given a separation package, but from that with that separation package, we were forced to sign a non-disclosure agreement. So we couldn't talk about how we felt about the organization or how we felt about the organization closing the school. The latter was important for the organization because downsizing events affect the retained employee's intent to quit, organizational commitment, and job insecurity. Corporations often grow larger by combining with other businesses. This can be accomplished through a merger, for example, the joining of two organizations of equal power and status, or an acquisition. For example, one organization purchases another. In an acquisition, the purchasing organization is usually the more powerful or dominant partner. In both cases, there is usually a duplication of services between the two companies, which commonly involves a reduction of staff. This leads to organizational processes and stresses similar to those that occur in downsizing events. Mergers require determining how the organizational culture will change, to which employees also must adjust. There can be additional stress on workers as they lose their connection to the old organization and try to make connections with the new combined group. Research in this area focuses on understanding employee reactions and making practical recommendations for managing these organizational changes. Many people juggle the demands of work life with the demands of their home life, whether it is caring for children or taking care of an elderly parent. This is known as work-family balance. We might commonly think about work interfering with family, but it is also the case that family responsibilities may conflict with work obligations. Greenhouse and Butel in 1985 first identified three sources of work-family conflicts. Time devoted to work makes it difficult to fulfill requirements of family or vice versa. Strain from participation in work makes it difficult to fulfill requirements of family or vice versa. Specific behaviors required by work make it difficult to fulfill the requirements of family or vice versa. Women often have greater responsibility for family demands, including home care, child care, and caring for aging parents, yet men in the United States are increasingly assuming a greater share of domestic responsibilities. Research has documented that women report greater levels of stress from work, family conflict, and this is according to Gillenstein and Palmer in 2005. There are many ways to decrease work-family conflict and improve people's job satisfaction. These include support in the home, which can take various forms: emotional listening, practical help with chores. Workplace support can include understanding supervisors, flex time, leave with pay, and telecommuting. Flex time usually involves a requirement of core hours spent in the workplace around which the employee may schedule his arrival and departure from work to meet family demands. Telecommuting involves employees working at home and setting their own hours, which allows them to work during different parts of the day and to spend part of the day with their family. This may also be known as e-commuting, working remotely, flexible workspace, or simply working from home. Some organizations have on-site daycare centers, and some companies even have on-site fitness centers and health clinics. In a study of the effectiveness of different coping methods, LaPierre and Allen in 2006 found practical support from home more important than emotional support. They also found that immediate supervisor support for a worker significantly reduced work-family conflict through such mechanisms as allowing an employee the flexibility needed to fulfill family obligations. Flex time did not help with coping, and telecommuting actually made things worse, perhaps reflecting the fact that being at home intensifies the conflict between work and family, because with the employee in the home, the demands of the family are more evident. A significant portion of the IO research focuses on management and human relations. Douglas Mcgregor in 1960 combined scientific management, a theory of management that analyzes and synthesizes workflows, with the main objective of improving economic efficiency, especially labor productivity, and human relations, into the notion of leadership behavior. Mcgregor's theory lays out two different styles called Theory X and Theory Y. In the Theory X approach, the management managers assume that most people dislike work and are not innately self-directed. Theory X managers perceive employees as people who prefer to be led and told which tasks to perform and when. Their employees have to be watched carefully to be sure that they work hard enough to fulfill the organization's goals. Theory X workplaces will often have employees punch a clock when arriving and leaving the workplace. Tardiness is punished. Theory X supervisors will ignore employees' suggestions of improved efficiency and reprimand employees for speaking out of order. These supervisors blame efficiency failures on individual employees rather than the systems or policies in place. Managerial goals are achieved through a system of punishments and threats rather than enticements and rewards. Managers are suspicious of employees' motivations and always suspect selfish motivations for their behavior at work, for example, being paid as their sole motivation for work. In the Theory Y approach, managers assume that most people seek inner satisfaction and fulfillment from their work. Employees function better under leadership that allows them to participate in and provide input about setting their personal and work goals. In Theory Y workplaces, employees participate in decisions about prioritizing tasks. They may belong to teams that, once given a goal, decide themselves how it will be accomplished. In such a workplace, employees are able to provide input on matters of efficiency and safety. Another management style was described by Donald Clifton, who focused on research on how an organization can best use an individual's strengths, an approach he called strengths-based management. He and his colleagues interviewed 8,000 managers and concluded that it is important to focus on a person's strengths, not their weaknesses. A strength is a particular enduring talent possessed by an individual that allows them to provide consistent, near-perfect performance in tasks involving that talent. Clifton argued that our strengths provide the greatest opportunity for growth. Leadership is an important element of management. Leadership styles have been major interests within IO research, and researchers have proposed numerous theories of leadership. Bass in 1985 popularized and developed the concepts of transactional leadership versus transformational leadership styles. In transactional leadership, the focus is on supervision and organizational goals, which are achieved through a system of rewards and punishments, for example, transactions. Transactional leaders maintain the status quo. They are leaders, they are managers. People who have transformational leadership possess 4 attributes to varying degrees. They're charismatic, highly liked role models, inspirational, optimistic about goal attainment, intellectually stimulating, encourage critical thinking and problem solving, and considerate. Women tend to practice an interpersonal style of leadership. For example, she focuses on morale and welfare of the employees, and men practice a task-oriented style. He focuses on accomplishing tasks. Larger sex-related differences are observed when leadership style was categorized as democratic or autocratic, and these differences were consistent across all types of studies. Similarities between the sexes in leadership styles are attributable to both sexes needing to conform to the organization's culture. Sex-related differences reflect inherent differences in the strengths each sex brings to bear on leadership practice. A new and emerging area of research within psychology focuses on leadership and the relationship with leaders from the perspective of a follower. Studies point to the need to examine the leader-follower relationship in both directions, instead of focusing only on leadership, to better understand the dynamics of the relationship. An employee's need for leadership is an important component of the leader-follower relationship. Some individuals are significantly more autonomous than others, and as a result do not respond as well to leaders who provide a lot of structure and rigidity of processes, in turn reducing the quality of their relationship with their leader. Other employees who are high in need for leadership have a better relationship with their leader if they are provided with a well-structured environment with clear responsibilities and little ambiguity in their work. These followers work best in situations where they feel they can comfortably perform the work with little requirement to think outside of the guidelines that have been provided. For these individuals, having a leader who is able to set a clear path forward for the employee with little need for deviation promotes a strong, positive leader-follower relationship. The workplace today is rapidly changing due to a variety of factors, such as shifts in technology, economics, foreign competition, globalization, and workplace demographics. Organizations need to respond quickly to changes in these factors. Many companies are responding to these changes by structuring their organizations so that work can be delegated to work teams which bring together diverse skills, experience, and expertise. In the team-based approach, teams are brought together and given a specific task to goal to accomplish. Despite their burgeoning popularity, team structures do not always deliver greater productivity. The work of teams is an active area of research. There are 3 basic types of teams: problem resolution teams, creative teams, and tactical teams. I just want to go back to this picture right here. We got this lady smiling, this guy's smiling, this lady's smiling, this guy's talking, she's looking interested. Look at this guy right here. Look at the expression on his face. Everybody's smiling except him. And I'm wondering who's in charge. But theoretically, she's in charge because she's standing up. But look at his face. Just kind of curious. There are 3 basic types of teams: problem resolution teams, creative teams, and tactical teams. Problem resolution teams are created for the purpose of solving a particular problem or issue. Creative teams are used to develop innovative possibilities or solutions, and tactical teams are used to execute a well-defined plan or objective. One area of active research involves a fourth kind of team, the virtual team. These studies examine how groups of geographically disparate people brought together using digital communications technology function. Virtual teams are more common due to the growing globalization of organizations and the use of consulting partnerships facilitated by digital communication. Each company and organization has an organizational culture. Organizational culture encompasses the values, visions, hierarchies, norms, and interactions among its employees. It is how an organization is run, how it operates, and how it makes decisions. The industry in which the organization participates may have an influence. Different departments within one company can develop their own subculture within their organization's culture. Researchers have identified 3 layers in organizational culture: observable artifacts, espoused values, and basic assumptions. Observable artifacts are the symbols, language, narratives, and practices that represent the underlying cultural assumptions. Espoused values are concepts or beliefs that the management or the entire organization endorses. There are rules that allow employees to know which actions they should take in different situations and which information they should adhere to. These basic assumptions generally are unobservable and unquestioned. And this was part of the problem with the Ashford University situation. They were trying to run the school as if it were a business, and of course, you can't do that. For one thing, the accrediting agency won't let you do that. The accrediting agency wants the academics to be running the school rather than businessmen, and that kind of went against the grain with the guy that owned the company, and so he closed the school. Now it's gone. Ashford University doesn't exist anymore. For a while, it existed online, and then they sold the online platform to the University of Arizona. So if you work online with the University of Arizona, you're actually working with the Ashford format. And the parent organization closed their doors. They were called Bridgepoint, and now they are called Zuvio. And I'm not exactly sure what they do, but I don't have anything to do with them anymore. I was not a happy person working for them, much happier working at Dene College. Not only do I make more money, but I feel better about the job that I'm doing. Many workplaces offer diversity training to help everyone involved bridge and understand cultural differences. Diversity training educates participants about cultural differences with the goal of improving teamwork. There is always the potential for prejudice between members of 2 groups, but the evidence suggests that simply working together, particularly if the conditions of the work are set carefully, that such prejudice can be reduced or eliminated. Researchers conducted a meta-analysis to examine the question of whether contact between groups reduced prejudice between these groups. They found that there was a moderate but significant effect. They also found that the effect was enhanced when the 2 groups met under conditions in which they have equal standing, common goals, cooperation between the groups, and especially support on the part of the institution or authorities for the contact. One well-recognized negative aspect of organizational culture is a culture of harassment, including sexual harassment. Most organizations of any size have developed sexual harassment policies that define sexual harassment or harassment in general, and the procedures the organization has set in place to prevent and address it when it does occur. The U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission provides the following description of sexual harassment. Unwelcome sexual advances, requests for sexual favors, and other verbal or physical conduct of a sexual nature constitute sexual harassment when this conduct explicitly or implicitly affects an individual's employment, unreasonably interferes with an individual's work performance, or creates an intimidating, hostile, or offensive work environment. And this is paragraph 2. One form of sexual harassment is called quid pro quo. Quid pro quo means that you give something to get something, and it refers to a situation in which organizational rewards are offered in exchange for sexual favors. Quid pro quo harassment is often between an employee and a person with greater power in the organization. Hostile environment sexual harassment is a type of workplace harassment. In this situation, an employee experiences conditions in the workplace that are considered hostile or intimidating. Isolated occurrences of these events do not constitute harassment, but a pattern of repeated occurrences does. In addition to violating organizational policies against sexual harassment, these forms of harassment are illegal. Workplace violence is one aspect of workplace safety that IO psychologists study. Workplace violence is an act or threat of physical violence, harassment, intimidation, or other threatening, disruptive behavior that occurs at the workplace. And it ranges from threats and verbal abuse to physical assaults and even homicide. There are different targets of workplace violence. A person could commit violence against coworkers, supervisors, or property. Warning signs often precede such actions: intimidating behavior, threats, sabotaging equipment, or radical changes in a coworker's behavior. Often there is intimidation and then escalation that leads to even further escalation. It is important for employees to involve their immediate supervisor if they ever feel intimidated or unsafe. Murder is the second leading cause of death in the workplace. The first leading cause of death, of course, is accidents. It is also the primary cause of death for women in the workplace. Every year there are nearly 2 million workers who are physically assaulted or threatened with assault. Many are murdered in domestic violence situations by boyfriends or husbands who chose the woman's workplace to commit their crimes. And as you can see, women, 81.9% of all homicides by gender, this is between 2011 and 2013, were men, 18.1% were women. Procedural justice refers to the fairness of the processes by which outcomes are determined in conflicts with or among employees. Aggression against a supervisor was predicted if a worker felt unfairly treated or untrusted. Job security and alcohol consumption predicted aggression against a subordinate. To understand and predict workplace violence, researchers emphasize the importance of considering the employee target of aggression or violence and characteristics of both the workplace characteristics and the aggressive or violent person. Human factor psychology or ergonomics, a term that is favored in Europe, is the third subject area within industrial and organizational psychology. This field is concerned with the integration of the human-machine interface in the workplace through design and specifically with researching and designing machines that fit human requirements. The integration may be physical or cognitive or a combination of both. Anyone who needs to be convinced that the field is necessary need only try to operate an unfamiliar television remote control or use a new piece of software for the first time. Human factor professionals are involved in design from the beginning of a project, as is more common in software design projects or toward the end in testing and evaluation, as is more common in traditional industries. Another important role of human factor professionals is in the development of regulations and principles of best design. These regulations and principles are often related to work safety. Many of the concerns of human factors psychology are related to workplace safety. These concerns can be studied to help prevent work-related injuries of individual workers or those around them. Safety protocols may also be related to activities such as commercial driving or flying, medical procedures, and law enforcement, and that have potential to impact the public. One of the methods used to reduce accidents in the workplace is a checklist. The airline industry is one industry that uses checklists. Pilots are required to go through a detailed checklist
of the different parts of the aircraft before takeoff to ensure that all essential equipment is working correctly. Astronauts also go through checklists before takeoff. Safety concerns also lead to limits to how long an operator, such as a pilot or truck driver, is allowed to operate the equipment. Recently, the Federal Aviation Administration introduced limits for how long a pilot is allowed to fly without an overnight break. And as you can see, this pilot is asleep. And that's the end of the chapter. Okay, let's get rid of this, and we'll go to this. Oh, wait a minute, we're at the bottom. There we go. Okay, chapter 14, Stress, Lifestyle, and Health. Not real pleased with this chapter. I've taught this class, and I thought they could have done a better job. But we'll go ahead and tackle what the textbook talks about. This is a yoga position, I guess. Anyway, I thought that had to do with health. The term stress, as it relates to the human condition, first emerged in scientific literature in the 1930s, but it did not enter the popular vernacular until the 1970s. Today, we often use the term loosely in describing a variety of unpleasant feelings, feeling states. For example, we often say we are stressed out when we feel frustrated, angry, conflicted, overwhelmed, or fatigued. Despite the widespread use of the term, stress is a fairly vague concept that is difficult to define with precision. Researchers have had a difficult time agreeing on an acceptable definition of stress. Some have conceptualized stress as a demanding or threatening event or situation, for example, a high-stress job, overcrowding, and long commutes to work. Such conceptualizations are known as stimulus-based definitions because they characterize stress as a stimulus that causes certain reactions. Stimulus-based definitions of stress are problematic, however, because they fail to recognize that people differ in how they view and react to challenging life events and situations. Others have conceptualized stress in ways that emphasize the physiological response that occur when faced with demanding or threatening situations, for example, increased arousal. These conceptualizations are referred to as response-based definitions because they describe stress as a response to environmental conditions. Endocrinologist Hans Selye once defined stress as the response of the body to any demand, whether it is caused by or results in pleasant or unpleasant conditions. And this is Hans Selye right here. This is a picture of him. The useful way to conceptualize stress is to view it as a process whereby an individual perceives and responds to events that they appraise as overwhelming or threatening to their well-being. A critical element of this definition is that it emphasizes the importance of how we appraise, that is, judge, demanding, or threatening events, often referred to as stressors. These appraisals, in turn, influence our reactions to such events. In other words, it's how we look at the stressor as to whether it is, as to how stressful it is. If we appraise it as extreme, then we'll have an extreme reaction to it. If we appraise it as handleable, then we will have a less powerful response to it. A primary appraisal involves judgment about the degree of potential harm or threat to well-being that a stressor might entail. A stressor would likely be appraised as a threat if one anticipates that it could lead to some kind of harm, loss, or other negative consequence. Conversely, a stressor would likely be appraised as a challenge if one believes that it carries the potential for gain or personal growth. The perception of the threat triggers a secondary appraisal, judgment of the options available to cope with a stressor, as well as perceptions of how effective such options will be. A threat tends to be viewed as less catastrophic if one believes something can be done about it. To be sure, some stressors are inherently more stressful than others in that they are more threatening and leave less potential for variation in cognitive appraisals. For example, objective threats to one's health or safety. Nevertheless, appraisal will still play a role in augmenting or diminishing our reactions to such events. If a person appraises an event as harmful and believes that the demands imposed by the event exceed the available resources to manage or adapt to it, the person will subjectively experience a state of stress. If one does not appraise the same event as harmful or threatening, they are unlikely to experience stress. According to this definition, environmental events trigger stress reactions by the way that they are interpreted and the meanings they are assigned. Stress is largely in the eye of the beholder. It's not so much what happens to you as it is how you respond. And that's according to Selye in 1976. Stress can sometimes be a positive motivating force that can improve the quality of your life. This kind of stress, which Selye called eustress, from the Greek eu, which means good, is a good kind of stress associated with positive feelings, optimal health, and performance. A moderate amount of stress can be beneficial in challenging situations. Research shows that moderate stress can enhance both immediate and delayed recall of educational material. Increasing one's level of stress will cause performance to change in a predictable way. As stress increases, so do performance and general well-being, eustress. When stress levels reach an optimal level, performance reaches its peak. A person at this stress level is colloquially at the top of his game, meaning he feels fully energized, focused, and can work with minimal effort and maximum efficiency. When stress exceeds this optimal level, it is no longer a positive force. It becomes excessive and debilitating and what Selye termed distress, from the Latin dis, meaning bad. People who reach this level of stress feel burned out. They are fatigued, exhausted, and their performance begins to decline. If the stress remains excessive, health may begin to erode as well. Stress is everywhere, and it has been on the rise over the last several years, especially with the pandemic. Each of us is acquainted with stress. Some are more familiar than others. In many ways, stress feels like a load you just can't carry. Stress is an experience that evokes a variety of responses, including those that are psychological, for example, accelerated heart rate, headaches, or gastrointestinal problems, cognitive, such as difficulty concentrating or making decisions, and behavioral, drinking alcohol, smoking, or taking actions, directing and eliminating the cause of the stress. Although stress can be positive at times, it can have deleterious effects, health implications, contributing to the onset and progression of a variety of physical illnesses and diseases. The scientific study of how stress and other psychological factors impact health falls within the realm of health psychology, a subfield of psychology devoted to understanding the importance of psychological influences on health, illness, and how people respond when they become ill. Health psychology emerged as a discipline in the 1970s, a time during which there was increasing awareness of the role behavioral and lifestyle factors play in the development of illnesses and diseases. Health psychologists investigate issues such as why people make certain lifestyle choices, for example, smoking or eating unhealthy food, despite knowing the potential adverse health implications of such behaviors. Health psychologists also design and investigate the effectiveness of interventions aimed at changing unhealthy behaviors. One of the more fundamental tasks of health psychologists is to identify which groups of people are especially at risk for negative health outcomes based on psychological or behavioral factors. Psychologist Walter Cannon in 1932 proposed the fight or flight response, which occurs when a person experiences very strong emotions, especially those associated with a perceived threat. During the fight or flight response, the body is rapidly aroused by activation of both the sympathetic nervous system and the endocrine system. This arousal helps prepare the person to either fight or flee from a perceived threat. According to Cannon, the fight or flight response is a built-in mechanism that assists in maintaining homeostasis, an internal environment in which physiological variables such as blood pressure, respiration, digestion, and temperature, are stabilized at levels optimal for survival. Thus, Cannon viewed the fight or flight response as adaptive because it enables people to adjust internally and externally to threats in their environment, allowing them to continue to be alive and overcome the threat. And I put these guys in here because they never touch each other. Here there's threats, but they're not really hitting each other. Half the time their swings are pretty far away from each other. Selye discovered the general adaptation syndrome, the body's nonspecific physiological response to stress. The general adaptation syndrome consists of 3 stages: alarm reaction, stage of resistance, and stage of exhaustion. Alarm reaction describes the body's immediate reaction upon facing a threatening situation or emergency, and it is roughly analogous to the fight or flight response described by Cannon. During an alarm reaction, you are alerted to a stressor, and your body alarms you with a cascade of physiological reactions that provide you with the energy to manage the situation. If exposure to a stressor is prolonged, the organism will enter the stage of resistance. During this stage, the initial shock of alarm reaction has worn off, and the body has adapted to the stressor. Nevertheless, the body also remains on alert and is prepared to respond as it did during the alarm reaction, although with less intensity. If exposure to a stressor continues over a long period of time, the stage of exhaustion ensues. At this stage, the person is no longer able to adapt to the stressor. The body's ability to resist becomes depleted as physical wear takes its toll on the body's tissues and organs. As a result, illness, disease, and other permanent damage to the body, even death, may occur. Selye's general adaptation syndrome suggests that stressors tax the body via a three-phase process: an initial jolt, subsequent readjustment, and a later depletion of all physical resources. That ultimately leads to the groundwork for serious health problems and even death. It should be pointed out that this model is a response-based conceptualization of stress, focusing exclusively on the body's physical responses while largely ignoring psychological factors such as appraisal and interpretation of threats. Selye's model has had an enormous impact on the field of stress because it offers a general explanation for how stress can lead to physical damage and disease. Prolonged or repeated stress has been implicated in development of a number of disorders such as hypertension and coronary artery disease. The physiological mechanisms of stress are extremely complex. They generally involve the work of 2 systems: the sympathetic nervous system and the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. When a person first perceives something as stressful, Selye's alarm reaction, the sympathetic nervous system triggers arousal via the release of adrenaline from the adrenal glands. And this is the hypothalamus, which tells the pituitary gland to release ACTH. The ACTH is released, and that tells the adrenal glands to release cortisol and epinephrine, or adrenaline. Hormones activate the fight or flight response to stress, such as accelerated heart rate and respiration. The HPA axis, which is primarily endocrine in nature, becomes especially active, although it works much more slowly than the sympathetic nervous system. In response to stress, the hypothalamus, one of the limbic structures in the brain, releases corticotropin-releasing factor, a hormone that releases the pituitary gland, that causes the pituitary gland to release adrenocorticotropic hormone, or ACTH. And once again, there's the hypothalamus, and here is the pituitary. The ACTH then activates the adrenal glands to secrete a number of hormones into the bloodstream. An important one is cortisol, which can affect virtually every organ within the body. Cortisol is commonly known as a stress hormone and helps provide the boost of energy when we first encounter a stressor, preparing us to run away or fight. Sustained elevated levels of cortisol weaken the immune system. We have a natural surge of cortisol at 2 times during the day, Strangely enough, this is the same for everybody. We have a surge at 8 o'clock in the morning, and we have a surge at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Evolutionary psychologists have tried to figure out what's going on, why in the world we have these two natural surges of cortisol, but all we've come up with so far are theories. In short bursts, this process can have some favorable effects, such as providing extra energy, improving immune system functioning temporarily, and decreasing pain sensitivity. Extended release of cortisol with prolonged or chronic stress often comes at a high price. High levels of cortisol have been known to produce a number of harmful effects, significantly weaken the immune system, while high levels are frequently observed among depressed individuals. When stress is extreme or chronic, it can have profoundly negative consequences. Stress often contributes to the development of certain psychological disorders, including post-traumatic stress disorder, major depressive disorders, and other serious psychiatric conditions. Stress is linked to the development and progression of a variety of physical illnesses and diseases. Researchers in one study found that people injured during the September 11, 2001 World Trade Center disaster, or who developed post-traumatic stress symptoms afterward, later suffered significantly elevated rates of heart disease. Self-reported stress symptoms among aging and retired Finnish food industry workers were associated with morbidity 11 years later. Morbidity means death. This study also predicted the onset of musculoskeletal nervous system and endocrine and metabolic disorders. Another study reported that male South Korean manufacturing employees who reported high levels of work-related stress were more likely to catch the common cold over the next several months than were those employees who reported lower work-related stress levels. For an individual to experience stress, they must first encounter a potential stressor. In general, stressors can be placed into one of two broad categories, chronic and acute. Chronic stressors include events that persist over an extended period of time, such as caring for a parent with dementia, long-term unemployment, or imprisonment. Acute stressors involve brief focal events that sometimes continue to be experienced as overwhelming well after the event has ended, such as falling on an icy sidewalk and breaking your leg. Whether chronic or acute, potential stressors come in many shapes and sizes. They can include major traumatic events, significant life changes, daily hassles, as well as other situations in which a person is regularly exposed to threat, challenge, or danger. Some stressors involve traumatic events or situations in which a person is exposed to actual or threatened death or serious injury. Stressors in this category include exposure to military combat, threatened or actual physical assaults, for example, physical attacks, sexual assault, robbery, childhood abuse, terrorist attacks, natural disasters, for example, earthquakes, floods, hurricanes, and automobile accidents. Men, non-whites, and individuals in lower socioeconomic status groups report experiencing a greater number of traumatic events than do women, whites, and individuals in higher socioeconomic status groups. Some individuals who are exposed to stressors or of extreme magnitude develop post-traumatic stress disorder, also known as PTSD, a chronic stress reaction characterized by experiences and behaviors that may include intrusive and painful memories of the stressor event, jumpiness, persistent negative emotional states, detachment from others, angry outbursts, and avoidance of reminders of the event. Most stressors that we encounter are not nearly as intense as those already mentioned. Many potential stressors we face involve events or situations that require us to make changes in our ongoing lives and require time as we adjust to those changes. Examples include death of a close family member, marriage, divorce, and moving. In the 1960s, psychiatrists Thomas Holmes and Richard Rahe examined the link between life stressors and physical illness. based on the hypothesis that life events requiring significant changes in a person's normal life routines are stressful, whether these events are desirable or undesirable. They developed the Social Readjustment Rating Scale, consisting of 43 life events that require varying degrees of personal adjustment. Many life events that most people would consider pleasant, for example, holidays, retirement, and marriage, are among those listed on the SRRS. These are examples of eustress. Holmes and Rahe also propose that life events can add up over time and that experiencing a cluster of stressful events increases one's risk of developing physical illnesses. In developing their scale, Holmes and Rahe identified 48 events they referred to as life change units. Death of a spouse ranked highest on the scale with 100 LCUs, and divorce ranked second highest with 73 LCUs. In addition, personal injury or illness, marriage, and job termination also ranked highly on the scale with 53, 50, and 47 LCUs, respectively. Change in the residence, 20 LCUs. Change in eating habits, 15 LCUs. Vacation, 13 LCUs, ranked low on the scale. Minor violations of the law ranked the lowest with 11 LCUs. LCUs for each checked item are totaled for a score quantifying the amount of life change. Agreement on the amount of adjustment required by the various life events on the SRRS is highly consistent, even cross-culturally. Researchers demonstrated that accumulating a high number of life change units within a brief period of time, 1 or 2 years, is related to a wide range of physical illnesses, even accidents and athletic injuries, and mental health problems. In an early demonstration, researchers obtained LCU scores for U.S. and Norwegian Navy personnel who were about to embark on a 6-month voyage. A later examination of medical records revealed positive but small correlations between LCU scores prior to the voyage and subsequent illness symptoms during the ensuing 6-month journey. People tend to experience more physical symptoms such as backache, upset stomach, diarrhea, and acne on specific days in which self-reported LCU values are considerably higher than normal, such as the day of a family member's wedding. The Social Readjustment Rating Scale provides researchers a simple, easy-to-administer way of assessing the amount of stress in people's lives, and it has been used in hundreds of studies. Despite its widespread use, the scale has been subject to criticism. Many of the items on the SRRS are vague. Some have challenged its assumptions that undesirable life events are no more stressful than desirable ones. The SRRS remains one of the most well-known instruments in the study of stress, and it is a useful tool for identifying potential stress-related health outcomes. Potential stressors do not always involve major life events. Daily hassles, the minor irritations and annoyances that are part of our everyday life, such as rush hour traffic, lost keys, obnoxious coworkers, inclement weather, arguments with friends or family, can build on one another and leave us just as stressed as life change events. Researchers have demonstrated that the frequency of daily hassles is actually a better predictor of both physical and psychological health than are life change units. In a well-known study of San Francisco residents, the frequency of daily hassles was found to be more strongly associated with physical health problems than were life change events. Daily minor hassles, especially interpersonal conflicts, often lead to negative and distressed mood states. Cyber hassles that occur on social media may represent a modern and evolving source of stress. In one investigation, social media stress was tied to loss of sleep in adolescence, presumably because ruminating about social media caused a physiological stress response that increased arousal. Clearly, daily hassles can add up and take a toll on us, both emotionally and physically. Stressors can include situations in which one is frequently exposed to challenging and unpleasant events, such as difficult, demanding, or unsafe working conditions. Although most jobs and occupations can at times be demanding, some are clearly more stressful than others. Most would agree that jobs containing various unpleasant elements, such as those requiring exposure to loud noises, heavy equipment operator, constant harassment and threats of physical violence, prison guards, perpetual frustration, bus driver in a major city, or those mandating that an employee work alternating days and nights shifts, hotel desk clerks, are much more demanding and thus more stressful than those that do not contain such elements. Occupations with heavy workload, uncertainty, and lack of control create a great deal of stress. Chronic occupational stress contributes to job strain, a work situation that combines excessive job demands and workload with little discretion in decision-making or job control. Many occupations involve at least a moderate amount of job strain in that they often involve heavy workloads and little job control. For example, inability to decide when to take breaks. Such jobs are often low status and include those of factory workers, postal clerks, supermarket cashiers, taxi drivers, and short order cooks. And I just noticed I used the same picture. Oh no, she's got her eyes open and closed in another one. Okay. Job strain can have adverse consequences on both physical and mental health. It has been shown to be associated with increased risk of hypertension, heart attacks, recurrence of heart disease after a first heart attack, significant weight loss or gain, and major depressive disorder. A longitudinal study of over 10,000 British civil servants reported that workers under 50 years old who earlier had reported high job strain were 68% more likely to later develop heart disease than were those workers under 50 years old who reported little job strain. Eventually they determined that one of the reasons was the lack of control. That's what they determined. Some people who are exposed to chronically stressful work conditions can experience job burnout, which is general sense of emotional exhaustion and cynicism in relation to one's job. Job burnout occurs frequently among those in human service jobs, for example, social workers, teachers, therapists, and police officers. Job burnout consists of three dimensions. The first dimension is exhaustion, a sense that one's emotional resources are drained or that one is at the end of their rope and has nothing more to give at a psychological level. Second, job burnout is characterized by depersonalization, a sense of emotional detachment between the worker and the recipients of their services, often resulting in callous, cynical, or indifferent attitudes toward these individuals. Third, burnout is characterized by diminished personal accomplishments, which is a tendency to evaluate one's work negatively. Job strain appears to be one of the greatest risk factors leading to the job burnout, which is most commonly observed in workers who are older, ages 55 to 64, unmarried, and whose jobs involve manual labor. Heavy alcohol consumption, physical inactivity, being overweight, and having a physical or lifetime mental disorder are also associated with job burnout. In addition, depression often co-occurs with job burnout. One large-scale study of over 3,000 Finnish employees reported that half of the participants with severe job burnout and had some form of depressive disorder. Job burnout is often precipitated by feelings of having invested considerable energy, effort, and time into one's work while receiving little in return. For example, little respect or support from others or low pay. Our close relationships with friends and family, particularly the negative aspects of these relationships, can be a potent source of stress. Negative aspects of close relationships can include conflicts such as disagreements or arguments, lack of emotional support or confiding, and lack of reciprocity. All of these can be overwhelming, threatening to the relationship, and thus stressful. Such stressors can take a toll both emotionally and physically. A longitudinal investigation of over 9,000 British civil servants found that those who at one point had reported the highest levels of negative interactions with their closest relationships were 34% more likely to experience serious heart problems, fatal or non-fatal heart attacks, over a 13 to 15 year period compared to those who experienced the lowest levels of negative interactions. Health is affected when physiological reactions are sustained, as can happen in response to ongoing stress. If the reactions that compose the stress response are chronic, or if they frequently exceed normal ranges, they can lead to cumulative wear and tear on the body, in much the same way that running your air conditioner on full blast all summer will eventually cause wear and tear on your air conditioner. The high blood pressure that a person under considerable job strain experiences might eventually take a toll on their heart and set the stage for a heart attack or heart failure. Someone exposed to high levels of the stress hormone cortisol might become vulnerable to infection or disease because of weakened immune system functioning. Physical disorders or diseases whose symptoms are brought about or worsened by stress and emotional factors are called psychophysiological disorders. The physical symptoms of psychophysiological disorders are real, and they can be produced or exacerbated by psychological factors. Hence the psycho and psychological and physiological and psychophysiological. Friedman and Booth Cooley in 1987 statistically reviewed 101 studies to examine the link between personality and illness. They proposed the existence of disease-prone personality characteristics, including depression, anger, hostility, and anxiety. A study of over 61,000 Norwegians identified depression as a risk factor for all major disease-related causes of death. In addition, neuroticism, a personality trait that reflects how anxious, moody, and sad one is, has been identified as a risk factor for chronic health problems and mortality. The immune system is the body's surveillance system. It consists of a variety of structures, cells, and mechanisms that serve to protect the body from invading microorganisms that can harm or damage the body tissues and organs. When the immune system is working as it should, it keeps us healthy and disease-free by eliminating harmful bacteria, viruses, and other foreign substances that have entered the body. Other foreign substances might be fungus or pollen, allergens could be the other kind. And strangely enough, we have white cells that fight each and every one of these. Viruses are fought by one type of white cell, bacteria is fought by another, pollen is fought by another, heavy metals has its own type of white cell that fights it. So there you go. It doesn't really mention this, and it's one of the reasons I'm not real pleased with the way they put this chapter together. Sometimes the immune system will function erroneously. Sometimes it can go awry by mistaking your body's own healthy cells for invaders and repeatedly attacking them. When this happens, the person is said to have an autoimmune disease, which can affect almost any part of the body. How an autoimmune disease affects a person depends on what part of the body is targeted. Strangely, most of the individuals with autoimmune diseases are women, but it's not that strange if you look at immune systems. The female immune system is much stronger than the male's immune system, and for that reason, women tend to suffer from autoimmune diseases more readily than men do. Rheumatoid arthritis, an autoimmune disease that affects the joints, results in joint pain, stiffness, and loss of function. Systemic lupus erythematosus, an autoimmune disease that affects the skin, can result in rashes and swelling of the skin. Graves' disease, an autoimmune disease that affects the thyroid gland, can result in fatigue, weight gain, and muscle aches. Other immune diseases, celiac disease, asthma, we're going to talk about that, eczema and psoriasis. Multiple sclerosis is an autoimmune disease. Hashimoto's thyroiditis is another autoimmune disease. The immune system may sometimes break down and be unable to do its job. This situation is referred to as immunosuppression, the decreased effectiveness of the immune system. When people experience immunosuppression, they become susceptible to any number of infections, illnesses, and diseases. Theoretically, I am immunosuppressed because I don't have a spleen, but as I have told you many times, I don't get sick ever. I lost my spleen in 1985, that was 35 years ago, and in essence, I haven't been sick since, so there you go. Acquired immune deficiency syndrome, AIDS, is a serious and lethal disease that is caused by human immunodeficiency virus, HIV, which greatly weakens the immune system by infecting and destroying antibody-producing cells, thus rendering an untreated person vulnerable to any of a number of opportunistic infections. Now, strangely enough, now you would think that, oh, well, you know, I lost my spleen in 1985. I must just stay away from diseased people. But the reality is that I have worked in the laboratory where I come in contact, or I came in contact. I don't work in the laboratory anymore. But when I was working in the laboratory from 1985 to 2000, I came in contact with sick people constantly. That was my job. My job was determining why people were sick. So you would think that since I was immunocompromised, I should have died from some infection. But like I said, I never get sick. So there you go. You can look at that a lot of different ways. The question of whether stress and negative emotional states can influence immune function has captivated researchers for over 3 decades, and discoveries made over that time have dramatically changed the face of health psychology. Psychoneuroimmunology is the field that studies how psychological factors such as stress influence the immune system and immune functioning. The term psychoneuroimmunology was first coined in 1981 when it appeared as a title of a book that reviewed available evidence for associations between the brain, endocrine system, and immune system. Now, strangely enough, this is kind of the area that I have worked in, mainly because I was working in medicine and then I became a psychologist. I worked with the immune system extensively, and because of that, I have had extensive experience working in psychoneuroimmunology. To a large extent, this field evolved from the discovery that there is a connection between the central nervous system and the immune system. We used to call them psychosomatic illnesses. Now we don't. Ader and Cohen in 1975 paired flavored water, the conditioned stimulus, with the presentation of a immunosuppressive drug, the unconditioned stimulus, causing sickness and unconditioned response. Not surprisingly, rats exposed to this pairing developed a conditioned aversion to the flavored water. However, the taste of the water itself later produced immunosuppression, a conditioned response, indicating that the immune system itself had been conditioned. Studies show that the effects of brief and chronic stressors on the immune system, public speaking, medical school examinations, unemployment, marital discord, divorce, death of spouse, burnout and job strain, caring for a relative with Alzheimer's disease, exposure to harsh climate of Antarctica. You may ask yourself, where in the world do they come up with all of these things? They have done different studies looking at each of these and its effects on your immune system. It has been repeatedly demonstrated that many kinds of stressors are associated with poor or weakened immune functioning. Now, you can't get these mixed up with immunosuppression mixed up with autoimmune diseases. They're not the same thing at all. Autoimmune diseases have to do with the fact that the immune system is actually attacking your immune system. And immunosuppression just has to do with a depletion of your immune system due to the fact that you've been under stress of one kind or another. It is important to remember that there is a tangible physiological connection between the brain and the immune system. The sympathetic nervous system innervates immune organs such as the thymus, the bone marrow, spleen, and even lymph nodes. And this is the reason why people think I should be immunocompromised. I don't have one of these. I lost it in 1985. Stress hormones released during hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis activation can adversely impact immune function by inhibiting the production of lymphocytes. And these are lymphocytes right here. These globs of purple are lymphocytes. These are immature lymphocytes, and these are mature lymphocytes. So the more cytoplasm it has, the more immature it is. These are red cells, and these, I'm not exactly sure what those are. They shouldn't be there. This is a platelet right here. These little purple dots are platelets. One of the jobs I had when I was working as a laboratory technician was blood smears. I would analyze blood smears. And what you do is you look at the blood smear and you identify all the different types of white cell. Well, this is only one type of white cell primarily. But if you saw the other types of white cells, you'd go, oh, okay. Well, it's easy to count those. So when you're looking at somebody and trying to determine if that person is sick, you have to determine if it's a bacterial infection, a viral infection, or an allergen, or heavy metal poisoning. So you look at their different types of white cells. The immune system increases the number of white cells that they need to destroy whatever it is that's invading your body. So if it's a bacteria, you have a neutrophil is the type of white cell that increases. We talk about lymphocytes because most of our chronic illnesses or our diseases that kill us, like the coronavirus, is a virus. Measles, mumps, chickenpox, they're all viruses. And that's one of the reasons, mononucleosis is caused by a virus. So if you had an appendicitis, which is usually a bacterial situation, we would look at your blood smear and determine that it was an appendicitis because you would have an increase of neutrophils, not of lymphocytes. But if it was AIDS, or if it was mononucleosis or a coronavirus, we'd see an increase of these guys, these lymphocytes. And that's what we used to do in the laboratory. It was really, normally I teach this in health psychology, but it wasn't in the book, so I decided not to put it in. I'm sorry. Anyway, so the whole reason we're talking about lymphocytes is because lymphocytes are a major part of the immune system, and lymphocytes are increased in viral infections, and viral infections are what kill off most people. Coronavirus, for example. Herpes is a virus. Measles, mumps, chickenpox, as I said before. The cardiovascular system is composed of the heart and the blood circulation system. For many years, cardiovascular disorders have been a major focal point in the study of psychophysiological disorders because of the cardiovascular system's centrality to the stress response. Heart disease is one such condition. Each year, heart disease causes approximately 1 in 3 deaths in the United States, and it is the leading cause of death in the developed world. That's what a heart attack looks like. The symptoms of heart disease vary somewhat depending on the specific kind of heart disease one has, but they generally involve angina. Angina just means chest pain. Chest pains are discomfort that occurs when the heart does not receive enough blood. That's angina. The pain often feels like the chest is being pressed or squeezed, burning sensations in the chest and shortness of breath, and are also commonly reported. Such pain and discomfort can spread to the arms, neck, jaws, stomach as nausea, and the back. I've had a heart attack. I had a heart attack in 2010. Right after I was fired from a job that I loved, and I had a heart attack. And I can tell you, I didn't really have angina. What I had was neck and jaw pain. Uh, and it was in my clavicles, right under my clavicle. So I thought it was, I didn't know it was a heart attack. I'd seen thousands of heart attacks, and I didn't recognize it in myself, as stupid as that is. Obviously, there's, uh, I just saw my cardiologist last week, and my cardiologist said, this isn't fair. You don't have any damage to your heart, even though you had a heart attack 11 years ago. There is no problem with your heart at all. A major risk factor for heart disease is hypertension, which is high blood pressure. Hypertension forces a person's heart to pump harder, thus putting more physical strain on the heart. If left unchecked, hypertension can lead to a heart attack, stroke, or heart failure. It can also lead to kidney failure and blindness. Hypertension is a serious cardiovascular disorder, and it is sometimes called the silent killer because it has no symptoms. One who has high blood pressure may not even be aware of their high blood pressure. Many risk factors contributing to cardiovascular disorders have been identified. These risk factors include social determinants such as aging, income, education, employment status. Behavioral risk factors include unhealthy diet, tobacco use, physical inactivity, excessive alcohol consumption, obesity, and diabetes. This is supposed to be a man drinking and smoking a cigarette at the same time. Looks more like Mountain Dew to me, but we'll pretend it's whiskey or something. Exposure to stressors of many kinds has also been linked to cardiovascular problems. Natural disasters, marital conflict, exposure to high traffic noise levels at one's home. Perceived discrimination appears to be associated with hypertension among African Americans. This is really kind of interesting. When I lived in Los Angeles, or actually I lived in Northridge, but there was a fairly busy street, and it was busy all the time. And we didn't realize how sleep deprived we were, my wife and I. Luckily, we moved away after about a year and moved to someplace quieter, but we didn't realize what was going on. It's one of the reasons why I live in the middle of a cornfield. Not a whole lot of noise out here. Our roads are gravel roads, so people don't zip up and down, so we very rarely hear anything. When the dogs hear a car drive past the road, which is about 200, 300 yards to our west, they'll bark because it happens so rarely. People who are prone to heart disease tend to think, feel, and act differently than those who are not. These individuals tend to be intensively driven workaholics who are preoccupied with deadlines and always seem to be in a rush. These individuals exhibit type A behavior pattern. Those who are more relaxed and laid back were characterized as type B. In a sample of type A's and type B's, it was discovered that heart disease was over 7 times more frequent among the type A's than the type B's. And of course, this guy's a type A, and this guy is probably a type B. I'm a type B, and you wonder why I had the heart attack, and I explained it to you. The reason I had the heart attack was because I got fired from a job that I really liked. And the reason they fired me was because they didn't want me to get my PhD, as strange as that may seem. And that was very distressing, because the only reason I was getting my PhD was to help my school, and then they told me they didn't want me to do it. The major components of a type A pattern include an aggressive and chronic struggle to achieve more and more in less and less time. Specific characteristics of the type A pattern include an excessive competitive drive, chronic sense of time urgency, impatience, and hostility toward others, particularly those who get in the person's way. Extensive research clearly suggests that the anger-hostility dimension of type A behavior pattern may be one of the most important factors in the development of heart disease. Haynes et al. In 1980 studies showed that suppressed hostility was found to substantially elevate the risk of heart disease for both men and women. Research showed that individuals who respond with high levels of anger in a stressful situation were over 6 times more likely than those who indicated less anger to have had a heart attack by age 55. and they were 3.5 times more likely to have experienced heart disease by the same age. From a health standpoint, it clearly does not pay to be an angry person. Cheetah and Steptoe in 2009 concluded that evidence suggests that anger and hostility constitute serious long-term risk factors for adverse cardiovascular outcomes among both healthy individuals and those already suffering from heart disease. One reason anger and hostility moods might contribute to cardiovascular disease is that such moods can create social strain, mainly in the form of antagonistic social encounters with others. This strain could then lay the foundation for disease-promoting cardiovascular responses among hostile individuals. In this transactional model, hostility and social strain form a cycle. A number of other negative emotional states have been linked with heart disease, including negative affectivity and depression. Negative affectivity is a tendency to experience distressed emotional states involving anger, contempt, disgust, guilt, fear, and nervousness. It has been linked with the development of both hypertension and heart disease. By the early 1990s, evidence showed that depressed individuals who were followed for long periods of time were at increased risk for heart disease and cardiac death. In one investigation of over 700 Denmark residents, those with the highest depression scores were 71% more likely to have experienced a heart attack than were those with lower depression scores. It is now clear that a relationship exists between patients with heart disease and patients with depression. Patients with heart disease have more depression than the general population, and people with depression are more likely to eventually develop heart disease and experience higher mortality than those who do not have depression. The more severe the depression, the higher the risk. In one study, death rates from cardiovascular problems was substantially higher in depressed people. Depressed men were 50% more likely to have died from cardiovascular problems, and depressed women were 70% more likely. And this is because, according to Osby et al. In 2001. A statistical review of 10 longitudinal studies involving initially healthy individuals revealed that those with elevated depressive symptoms have an average of 64% greater risk of developing heart disease than do those with fewer symptoms. And this is according to Wilson and Singal in 2003. And I just saw this, and I was so enamored by this happy kid that I had to put it in. I'm sorry. Doesn't have anything to do with what we were talking about. A study of over 63,000 registered nurses found that those with more depressed symptoms when the studies began were 49% more likely to experience fatal heart disease over a 12-year period. This is according to Wang et al. In 2009. Asthma is a chronic and serious disease in which the airways of the respiratory system become obstructed, leading to a great difficulty in expelling air from the lungs. The airway obstruction is caused by inflammation of the airways, leading to thickening of the airway walls and a tightening of the muscles around them, resulting in a narrowing of the airway. And this shows you how it happens. Because airways become obstructed, a person with asthma will sometimes have great difficulty breathing and will experience repeated episodes of wheezing, chest tightness, shortness of breath, and coughing, the latter occurring mostly during the morning and the night. Around 4,000 people die each year from asthma-related causes, and asthma is a contributing factor to another 7,000 deaths each year. The CDC has revealed that asthma affects 18.7 million U.S. adults and is more common among people with lower education and income levels. Especially concerning is that asthma is on the rise, with rates of asthma increasing 157% between 2000 and 2010. Asthma attacks are acute episodes in which an asthma sufferer experiences the full range of symptoms. Asthma exacerbation is often triggered by environmental factors such as air pollution, allergens, for example, pollen, mold, and pet hairs, cigarette smoke, airway infections, cold air, or a sudden change in temperature and exercise. People with asthma tend to report and display a higher level of negative emotions, such as anxiety, and asthma attacks have been linked to periods of high emotionality. High levels of emotional distress during both laboratory tasks and daily life have been found to negatively affect airway function and can produce asthma-like symptoms in people with asthma. In one investigation, 20 adults with asthma wore pre-programmed wristwatches that signaled them to breathe into a portable device that measures airway function. Results showed that higher levels of negative emotions and stress were associated with increased airway obstruction and self-reported asthma symptoms. A longitudinal study of 145 children found that parenting difficulties during the first year of life increased the chances that the child developed asthma by 107%. A cross-sectional study of over 10,000 Finnish college students found that high rates of parent or personal conflicts, for example, parental divorce, separation from spouse, or severe conflicts in other long-term relationships, increased the risk of asthma onset. A study of over 4,000 middle-aged men who were interviewed in the early 1990s and again a decade later found that breaking off an important life partnership, for example, divorce, or breaking off relationships with parents, increased the risk of developing asthma by 124% over the time of this study. A headache is a continuous pain anywhere in the head and neck region. Inflammation of the sinuses caused by an infection or allergic reaction can cause sinus headaches, which are experienced as pain in the cheeks and forehead. Migraine headaches are a type of headache thought to be caused by blood vessel swelling and increased blood flow. Migraines are characterized by severe pain on one or both sides of the head, an upset stomach, and disturbed vision. They are more frequently experienced by women than by men. Tension headaches are triggered by tightening, tensing of facial and neck muscles. They are the most commonly experienced kind of headache, accounting for about 42% of all headaches worldwide. In the United States, well over one-third of the population experiences tension headaches each year, and 2 to 3% of the population suffers from chronic tension headaches. And as I told Dr. Robinson, I don't get headaches. I've never had a headache, as weird as that may be. There you go, Betty Boop. A number of factors can contribute to tension headaches, including sleep deprivation, skipping meals, eye strain, overexertion, muscular tension caused by poor posture, and stress. Stress has been demonstrated to increase sensitivity to pain. Tension headache sufferers compared to non-sufferers have a lower threshold for and greater sensitivity to pain, and they report greater levels of subjective stress when faced with stressors. Stress may contribute to tension headaches by increasing pain sensitivity in already sensitive pain pathways in tension headache sufferers. This is really kind of curious because when I was growing up, I had a cousin that was exactly the same age as I was. He was a little bit older than I was, actually. But he would come and visit us, and my sister mentioned that Buster, my cousin, his muscles looked bigger than mine. He always had tense muscles, and mine were always relaxed, no matter what. Now because his muscles looked tenser, she assumed that he was a better athlete than I was, but that wasn't true at all. I was a much better athlete. I was much faster than he was. I was a better basketball player, a better baseball player, and he suffered from tension headaches. Now the reality was he was tense all the time. And I'm relaxed all the time. Even just before my race, my muscles are fairly relaxed. So I'm always fairly relaxed person. But he suffered from tension headaches almost constantly. There are various reasons. His mother was an evangelist, and she demanded that he be, praise God all the time. It was really kind of bizarre. And, of course, we didn't go to church, so that was a little bit different. Anyway, tension headaches. Lazarus and Folkman in 1984 distinguished two fundamental kinds of coping problem-focused coping and emotion-focused coping. In problem-focused coping, one attempts to manage or alter the problem that is causing one to experience stress, the stressor. Problem-focused coping strategies are similar to strategies used in everyday problem solving. They typically involve identifying the problem, considering possible solutions, weighing the costs and benefits of those solutions, and then selecting an alternate. Emotion-focused coping consists of efforts to change or reduce the negative emotions associated with stress. These efforts may include avoiding, minimizing, or distancing oneself from the problem or positive comparisons with others. I am not as bad off as she is, or seeking something positive in a negative event. Now that I've been fired, I can sleep in for a few days. In some cases, emotion-focused coping strategies involve reappraisal, whereby the stressor is construed differently and somewhat self-deceptively without changing its objective level of threat. While many stressors elicit both kinds of coping strategies, problem-focused coping is more likely to occur when encountering stressors we perceive as controllable, while emotion-focused coping is more likely to predominate when faced with stressors that we believe we are powerless to change. Clearly, emotion-focused coping is more effective in dealing with uncontrollable stressors. Perceived control is our belief about our personal capacity to exert influence over and shape outcomes, and it has major implications for our health and happiness. Research has demonstrated that perceptions of a personal control are associated with a variety of favorable outcomes, such as better physical and mental health and greater psychological well-being. Greater personal control is also associated with lower reactivity to stressors in daily life. The link between perceived control and health may provide an explanation for the frequently observed relationship between social class and health outcomes. Research has found that more affluent individuals experience better life partly because they tend to believe that they could personally control and manage their reactions to life stressors. Perhaps buoyed by the perceived level of control, individuals of higher social class may be prone to overestimating the degree of influence they have over particular outcomes. I just put this in here because I like this. They're hobbits, and they went to a full-sized human bar, and he got a pint of whatever, ale, I guess. Anyway, he was so, because they're hobbits. Hobbits are really short people. The need to form and maintain strong, stable relationships with others is a powerful, pervasive, and fundamental human motive. Building strong interpersonal relationships with others helps us establish a network of close, caring individuals who can provide social support in times of distress, sorrow, and fear. Social support can be thought of as the soothing impact of friends, family, and acquaintances. Social support can take many forms, including advice, guidance, encouragement, acceptance, emotional comfort, and tangible assistance, such as financial help. Other people can be very comforting to us when we are faced with a wide range of life stressors, and they can be extremely helpful in our efforts to manage these challenges. Social support appears to work by boosting the immune system, especially among people who are experiencing stress. In the study, spouses of cancer patients who reported high levels of social support showed indications of better immune functions on 2 out of 3 immune functioning measures compared to spouses who were below the median on reported social support. Studies of other populations have produced similar results, including those of spousal caregivers of dementia sufferers, medical students, elderly adults, and cancer patients. Beyond having a sense of control and establishing social support networks, there are numerous other means by which we can manage stress. A common technique people use to combat stress is exercise. It is well established that exercise, both long aerobic and short anaerobic duration, is beneficial for both physical and mental health. There is considerable evidence that physically fit individuals are more resistant to the adverse effects of stress and recover more quickly from stress than less physically fit individuals. One reason exercise may be beneficial is because it might buffer some of the deleterious physiological mechanisms of stress. In high-stress humans, exercise has been shown to prevent telomere shortening, which may explain the common observation of a youthful appearance among those who exercise regularly. Exercise in later adulthood appears to minimize the detrimental effects of stress on the hippocampus and memory. Among cancer survivors, exercise has been shown to reduce anxiety and depressive symptoms. Exercise is a highly effective tool for regulating stress. I can't emphasize exercise as a youth-giving endeavor. People that exercise live longer, they look better, they look younger. People that are sedentary die young. They look old all the time. Exercise is a fountain of youth. In essence, it is a fountain of youth. So I would suggest to anyone, if you're having any problems at all, see if exercise doesn't help you take care of your problem, whatever it is. Psychologists have suggested that happiness consists of three distinct elements: the pleasant life, the good life, and the meaningful life. This is the first time I've ever talked about happiness. I teach health psychology, and we never, ever talk about happiness. But it's in this chapter, so I'm going to go ahead and talk about it. The pleasant life is realized through the attainment of day-to-day pleasures that add fun, joy, and excitement to our lives. The good life is achieved through identifying our unique skills and abilities and engaging these talents to enrich our lives. Those who achieve the good life often find themselves absorbed in their work or their recreational pursuits. The meaningful life involves a deep sense of fulfillment that comes from using our talents in the service of the greater good, in ways that benefit the lives of others or that make the world a better place. In general, the happiest people tend to be those who perceive the full life. They orient their pursuits toward all three elements: the pleasant life, the good life, and the meaningful life. For practical purposes, a precise definition of happiness might incorporate each of these elements, an enduring state of mind consisting of joy, contentment, and other positive emotions, plus the sense that one's life has meaning and value. The definition implies that happiness is a long-term state, what is often characterized as subjective well-being rather than merely a transient positive mood we all experience from time to time. It is this enduring happiness that has captured the interest of psychologists and other social scientists. The average person in the world tends to be relatively happy and tends to indicate experiencing more positive feelings than negative feelings. When asked to evaluate their current lives on a scale ranging from 0 to 10, with 0 representing worst possible life and 10 representing best possible life, people in more than 150 countries surveyed from 2010 to 2012 reported an average score of 5.2. People who live in North America, Australia, and New Zealand reported the highest average score at 7.1, whereas those living in sub-Saharan Africa reported the lowest average score at 4.6. Worldwide, the 5 happiest countries are Denmark, Norway, Switzerland, the Netherlands, and Sweden. The United States is ranked 17th happiest. Here's a picture. Okay, those are all Scandinavian countries, except for Switzerland and the Netherlands. That's known as the Low Country. This is all Northern Europe right here. And as you can see, Canadians are happier than Americans are, or people in the United States. Australians and New Zealanders are happier than Canadians or people in the United States. Africa has a problem. Southern Asia has a problem. South America, not the happiest place in the world. Oh well. There you go. Family and other social relationships appear to be key factors correlated with happiness. Studies show that married people report being happier than those who are single, divorced, or widowed. Happy individuals also report that their marriages are fulfilling. Some have suggested that satisfaction with marriage and family life is the strongest predictor of happiness. Happy people tend to have more friends, more high-quality social relationships, and stronger social support networks than less happy people. Happy people also have a high frequency of contact with friends. A nation's per capita gross domestic product, the GDP, is associated with happiness levels changes in GDP, which is less certain index of household income, bear little relationships to changes in happiness. It has to do with gross domestic product. On the whole, residents of affluent countries tend to be happier than residents of poor countries. Within countries, wealthy individuals are happier than poor individuals, but the association is much weaker. To the extent that it leads to increases in purchasing power, increases in income are associated with increases in happiness. Income within societies appears to correlate with happiness only up to a point. In a study of over 450,000 U.S. residents, researchers found that well-being rises with annual income, but only up to $75,000. The average increase in reported well-being for people with incomes greater than $75,000 was null, or nothing. As implausible as these findings might seem, higher incomes may impair people's ability to savor and enjoy the small pleasures of life. Happy people, compared to those who are less happy, are more likely to graduate from college and secure more meaningful and engaging jobs. Once they obtain a job, they are also more likely to succeed. While education shows a positive but weak correlation with happiness, intelligence is not appreciably related to happiness. So education has something to do with happiness as well. The relationship between religiosity and happiness depends on societal circumstances. Nations and states with more difficult living conditions, widespread hunger, and low life expectancy tend to be more highly religious than societies with more favorable living conditions. Among those who live in nations with difficult living conditions, religiosity is associated with greater well-being. In nations with more favorable living conditions, religious and non-religious individuals report similar levels of well-being. However, this is the first time anybody's ever said this. I'm guessing that the person that wrote this is not religious. But religiosity I've always read that religiosity has a lot to do with happiness. So I'm saying religiosity has to do with happiness, even though they have all these strange arguments. The living conditions of one's nation can influence factors related to happiness. To the extent that people possess characteristics that are highly valued by their culture, they tend to be happier. Self-esteem is a stronger predictor of life satisfaction in individualistic cultures than in collectivistic cultures, and extroverted people tend to be happier in extroverted cultures than in introverted cultures. Something similar to sensory adaptation often occurs when people experience emotional reactions to life events. In much the same way our senses adapt to changes in stimulation, our eyes adapt to bright light after walking out of the darkness of a movie theater into bright sunlight, we eventually adapt to changing emotional circumstances in our lives. When an event that provokes positive or negative emotion occurs, at first we tend to experience its emotional impact at full intensity. We feel a burst of pleasure following such things as a marriage proposal, birth of a child, acceptance to law school, an inheritance, and the like. As you might imagine, lottery winners experience a surge of happiness after hitting the jackpot that eventually just burns off. They adapt to the feeling that they have money. In some circumstances, happiness levels do not revert to their original positions after a joyous occasion. People generally tend to adapt to marriages so that it no longer makes them happier or not unhappier than before. They often do not fully adapt to unemployment or severe disabilities. In a study, German respondents did not get lasting emotional boosts from marriage. Instead, they reported brief increases in happiness followed by quick adaptation. Widows and those who had been laid off experienced sizable decreases in happiness that appeared to result in long-term changes in life satisfaction. Long-term happiness levels can and do change for some people.
Recent findings about happiness provide an optimistic picture, suggesting that real changes in happiness are possible. Thoughtfully developed well-being interventions designed to augment people's baseline levels of happiness may increase happiness in ways that are permanent and long-lasting. These changes in happiness may be targeted at individual, organizational, and societal levels. Researchers in one study found that a series of happiness interventions involving such exercises as writing down 3 good things that occurred each day led to increases in happiness that lasted over 6 months. And this is 7 ways to boost your happiness: sleep well, eat healthy diet, get some exercise, get out in the sunshine, surround yourself with fragrance, listen to music, and meditate. Measuring happiness and well-being at the societal level over time may assist policymakers in determining if people are generally happy or miserable, as well as when and why they might feel the way that they do. Studies show that average national happiness scores over time and across countries relate strongly to 6 key variables: per capita gross domestic product, which reflects a nation's economic standard of living; social support; freedom to make important life choices; healthy life expectancy; freedom from perceived corruption in government and business; and generosity. In 1998, Martin Seligman urged psychologists to focus more on understanding how to build human strength and psychological well-being. Before that, we were focusing on problems, on mental illness, and we weren't focusing on the positive, we were focusing on the negative. Seligman helped establish positive psychology. Positive psychology can be thought of as a science of happiness. It is an area of study that seeks to identify and promote those qualities that lead to greater fulfillment in our lives. This field looks at people's strengths and what helps individuals to lead happy, contented lives, and it moves away from focusing on people's pathology, faults, and their problems. Some of the topics studied by positive psychologists include altruism and empathy, creativity, forgiveness, and compassion, the importance of positive emotions, enhancement of immune system functioning, savoring the fleeting moments of life, and strengthening virtues as a way to increase authentic happiness. Recent efforts in the field of positive psychology have focused on extending its principles toward peace and well-being at the level of the global community. Qualities that help promote psychological well-being, for example, having meaning and purpose in life, a sense of autonomy, positive emotions, and satisfaction with life, are linked with the range of favorable health outcomes, especially improved cardiovascular health, mainly through their relationships with biological functions and health behaviors. The quality that has received attention is positive affect, which refers to pleasurable engagement with the environment, such as happiness, joy, enthusiasm, alertness, and excitement. The characteristics of positive affect, as with negative affect, can be brief, long-lasting, or trait-like. Independent of age, gender, and income, positive affect is associated with greater social connectedness, emotional and practical support, adaptive coping efforts, and lower depression. It is also associated with longevity and favorable physiological functioning. And I would purport that one of the reasons why the housing market is in such a mess is because people are trying to move away from their jobs. They're trying to get away from negative life forces. They're trying to establish positive affects. And this is one of the reasons they're moving to more palatable places, like my house in the middle of a cornfield. That's what people are looking for now. And it's because of the coronavirus that people are moving. So hold on to your house. Be careful. People may want to move on to the Navajo reservation in order to get away from life's horrors, I guess. Positive affect serves as a protective factor against heart disease. In a 10-year study of Nova Scotians, the rate of heart disease was 22% lower for each 1-point increase on the measure of positive affect.
In terms of our health, the expression "don't worry, be happy" is helpful advice. There has also been much work suggesting that optimism, the general tendency to look on the bright side of things, is also a significant predictor of positive health outcomes. Whereas positive affect is mostly concerned with positive feeling states, optimism has been regarded as a generalized tendency to expect that good things will happen. Optimism has been conceptualized as a tendency to view life stressors and difficulties as temporary and external to oneself. Studies have consistently shown that optimism is linked to longevity, healthier behaviors, fewer post-surgical complications, better immune functioning among men with prostate cancer, and better treatment adherence. Optimistic people report fewer physical symptoms, less pain, better physical functioning, and are less likely to be rehospitalized following heart surgery. And that is finally the end of my lecture. I'll talk to you next week. Next week's going to be worse. I'm sorry. We're going to talk about mental illness and treatment for mental illnesses. So it's going to be a longer chapter.